Jenny Gilker is our third speaker. After working in real estate administration for almost 30 years, Jenny was unexpectedly laid off from a management position with a local real estate board. 1 year after being diagnosed with primary progressive multiple sclerosis, she was unemployed and facing an inevitable career change. Following a 3-week career exploration program where she discovered career counseling was a perfect match with her values, interests, and skills, she was fortunate enough to secure government funding, second career strategy, and face the challenge of returning to school after 36 years of working. Since graduating with honors from the program, she has worked as a business information officer, vocational specialist, and with her current employer, Spinal Cord Injury Ontario, which was previously CPA Ontario, as a job developer, employment counselor, job coach, and employment information coordinator, which is her current role. Some of her career accomplishments have included presentations at the annual Multiple Sclerosis Symposium here in Toronto, penning articles for the MS newsletter and CPA magazine. Outspoken, the mentorship program at GBC, presentations for the special needs module at the Career Work Council program at GBC, and various other workshops connected to the Toronto Rehab Hospital and Spinal Cord Injury Ontario. She prides herself on utilizing her sense of humor and positive attitude in her work to motivate others towards successful outcomes. Jenny, before you start, I also want to reiterate that we have always been pleased at the Toronto chapter to know that there's someone on the other side of the phone that we can refer our members to, that they would get the best care, the best support, and someone who knows their stuff. So thank you, Jenny, for being here today. Look forward to your presentation.
Thank you. I would like to thank the previous presenters, and based on the information they provided you, I can now leave. No, I'm not going to. Yes. Navigating the MS highway to employment. I know a lot about this as a person who is living and working with multiple sclerosis, and I work a lot with individuals that have mobility challenges, mainly mobility challenges, working for Spinal Cord Injury Ontario. And we do receive a number of referrals from the MS Society. Thank you. And I feel privileged to have this kind of work now that I'm facing retirement. I'm a few years away from retirement, a couple of years. And I'm very happy with the work that I'm doing right now. I see huge rewards. So considerations when looking for work, full or part-time. Everything is individual, as my predecessors have mentioned. And as a person living with MS, my symptoms would be different to maybe your symptoms. So I think what you need to consider when you're considering the hours of work when you're looking for work would be, how do your symptoms affect your abilities to do the job? How does your medication affect your abilities to do the job? And in doing so, when you're researching this, always receive feedback from your support circle regarding your symptoms, i.e. family and friends. There may be something going on that you just take for granted and you accept, but you don't really pay too much attention to it, whereas your external, your friends or your family would notice that and they would bring that to your attention. So that's very, very relevant. And job readiness. Look at your most recent work experience. Are you ready to go back to work? We really emphasize motivation, and if the motivation is there, but maybe, the mind is willing, but the body's weak, so really take a good look at your symptoms and how it's affecting you. Okay. I'm not the most technical savvy person, so I may end up messing this up and sending it in reverse. I have to apologize if I do. Disclosure. Rebecca talked a little bit about disclosure, and so did Tammy, I believe. I facilitate a number of workshops with my employer, Spinal Cord Injury Ontario, and I don't, myself personally, don't support disclosure, especially when you're job searching. There is a lot of discrimination out there, like it or not. And I'll give a very brief example of how that can be detrimental to you securing an interview for a job. I had a client who was legally blind, and always disclosed that she was blind when she was called to go for an interview and never got past the first interview. She had an excellent resume. And so in the case of disclosure, we would recommend that, I recommend personally that when you're applying for a job, there's no reason to disclose. You could have 10 heads and 5 pairs of ears. Either you do the job or you can't do the job. If you're applying for a job, make sure that you read the job description. Most job descriptions that are written by employers, a lot of people aren't aware of this, when they list the requirements of the job, the first requirement that's listed is likely a high percentage of your day. It will take, and then as you go through the list of requirements for the job, the last requirement could be maybe 1% of your daily tasks. When you're looking at accommodations, if you can do the first 9 tasks in the job, that 10th task could be your accommodation, and likely it would be at the bottom of the list of tasks. So can you do the job? It's not all about what you cannot do. Think about what you can do. When we're coaching our clients to go on interviews, a lot of people living with disabilities will, when you meet them for the first time, and I say, tell me a little bit about yourself, they'll tell you immediately, they'll tell you about your disability. Well, that's not what I want to hear. I want to hear about the good stuff. If you diss the dis and disability, what's left? It's ability. So tell me about what you can do and not what you can't do. Disclosure with your current employer. I hope I'm not going to say anything that's not quite legal. No obligation to disclose. We don't consider that relevant when you're first applying for a job or you're attending your first interview. An educated, a savvy employer might ask if you have a visible disability. For instance, if you're somebody who uses an assistive device like a wheelchair or a walking cane, when you enter the room for the interview, immediately they're going to know that there's something going on, that you have some kind of a disability. An educated employer towards the end of the interview may say, do you need any accommodations? They'll use that terminology, which is really good. We do cover, in my job, I cover a lot with regard to the interview process. Illegal or inappropriate interview questions. If you enter a room and an employer sees you in a wheelchair and they say, so, how come you're using that? How come you're in a wheelchair? You don't have to answer that question. It's not legal for them to ask you those kind of questions. It's just the same as if they asked you if you are married or if you have kids. Same thing. So one of the ways that we approach that kind of question, if an employer is asking that question, if they say, so how are you going to be able to do this? How is your disability going to affect you in this job? Is I would turn the question around and say, instead of discussing what I can't do, let's talk about what I can do. And I can do this really well. And that's when you go into your sales pitch with the employer, you're marketing yourself. It's just like you're selling a product on TV, the 30-second TV commercial. You're selling your abilities. You don't focus on what you can't do, focus on what you can do. So approaching a current employer, if you're working and you have, for instance, if you have multiple sclerosis and you've noticed some changes, some symptoms that are starting to exaggerate or whatever, and you're not sure how to approach your current employer, it depends on your work environment. If it's a unionized environment, you might be more comfortable speaking to your union steward. You pay for those services when you pay union dues. Your union steward is there to act as a liaison between you and the employer. You may be more comfortable going to human resources, or you may be more comfortable approaching your direct supervisor or manager. There is a section that you can check on the AODA website, and it's the Ontario Accessibility Employer Guide Toolkit. In my job, or where I work, our job developers use this a lot when they're negotiating accommodations with an employer. It is written, it is an employer guide toolkit, so it is written for the employer, but it can educate employees or potential employees as well if you take a look at that, and it's fairly easy reading. And so we use that frequently at work. I nearly forgot to change slides there, sorry. Communication tips regarding accommodations, how to explain about MS. I disclosed my disability when I was applying for my job because I thought it would help me get the job, and it did. So when I was asked, I have a noticeable gait with my MS because of my weak side, but when I entered the room and was interviewed, the employer I work for is Spinal Cord Injury Ontario, so of course they're very accommodating, and they know the law, and they didn't ask me about my disability, but the one question they asked me was, how much experience do you have working with people with disabilities? And I said, I have tons of experience working with people with disabilities because I am a person with a disability who's working. I thought that was relevant, and it did help me secure the employment that I have. Um, how to explain about MS if you're working? Is it related to work-specific tasks? Is your symptom going to affect your ability to complete that task? Do you have an accommodating employer? Are they approachable? Do your research maybe before you have that conversation. Be sure of what you need. What do you need? Is if it's a piece of equipment or if it's flexible work hours, where to get that equipment that you need, and how much is it going to cost. Like, be prepared. Self-advocate for sure, because if you don't, then nobody else is going to do it for you initially. And anyway, key questions to ask yourself. Is your quality of life changing? Are your symptoms affecting your productivity? Are you not enjoying your job anymore, and why? Is it related to your disability or other factors? Is your work life having a negative effect on your home life, your body cycles? How do you feel mentally, physically? If you are in a situation where you feel you can no longer work in the job that you're working in and an accommodation isn't going to help you, and you need to make major changes like I did to my career, there are programs out there that will help you, that will fund for you to go back to school and be re-educated in a second career. One is the Opportunities Fund, and another one is the Second Career Strategy. When I went back to school, I walked the walk. I was funded through Second Career, so I know a lot about the process, how long it takes, what work's involved, what research you need to do in order to secure the funding. Yes, there's a certain criteria that you need to meet in order to be eligible for the program. There's a number of places in Toronto you can go to, employment resource centers that are our assessment centers for this program. We are an assessment center for Second Career, and it's excellent. It's an excellent program. But you really need to know yourself, like physically, mentally. You may go into work one day, as a lot of us know with MS, and be able to have a perfectly normal work day, and then the next day, and this would be, now I've been educated by Tammy, it's an episodic disability where you could go in the second day and not be able to do what you did the first day. I'm not atypical. I'm high energy. I don't have fatigue, so I'm not a really good example, but I do work with other individuals who experience this in the workplace. So it's all about knowing yourself and how external or extrinsic, which is a new word I learned today, factors can affect your ability to work. It could be anything from the weather. It can be anything like your diet, what you ate on the weekend. And I think, and I do touch this on this later as well, keeping a journal is excellent. About your daily, how your day's gone, what affected me today. I felt really tired today. Why is that? Is it because I just didn't get enough sleep last night? Is it because I'm getting old and I'm starting to feel the aging process? Is it because I ate certain foods on the weekend? So keeping a daily journal, I find, really helps. Because there could be something, some factors or something that happened on the weekend or the night before, and you'll know not to repeat it. Of course, we all know all the great foods affect you with your MS symptoms. I know it does me. Wine, cheese, chocolate, all my favorite things. If I have too much of that on the weekend, then it's going to affect me. Monday morning is my most unfavorite day for working because I've usually relaxed on the weekend and eaten very rich foods, and I find that can affect me as well. So really, really look at your daily, how your day was on the weekend and how your day is or your evening is the night before, and what you have eaten or any activities you've had as well on the weekend. So the decision to continue working, some tips and tools. Self-advocacy, I talked about a little bit before, is everything that I've achieved in the workplace and in my life, I've fought for myself. I've received some external support, but most of it I've achieved just by my own, I guess, grittiness or whatever, or stubbornness or persistence to get what I want. I do have a very accommodating employer. My accommodations in the workplace were simple. I wear running shoes all the time to work, which saves me a bundle of money on shoes because I don't have to match shoes with outfits for working. So I do wear running shoes all the time. That's to help me with my balance and make me, I'm more stable on my feet. I also have requested everywhere I work. I always request that I have my workspace is very close to the washroom, and we don't need to go into the details why. So my workplace is always very close to a washroom facility. I have an accessible parking permit, and so I park very close to the entrance to where I'm working, so that eliminates excessive walking. I have to leave my chair every hour and get up and just walk around my office. So it's some little things like that. It's all about self-awareness and taking care of yourself. I have open discussions with my employer, again, a very accommodating employer. I haven't really had to negotiate anything regarding work-related tasks. I'm able to perform the tasks of my job. Some quick little tips, like if you, some simple things, as Rebecca had spoken about before, a high percentage of accommodations from an employer could cost the employer zero. It just might be an adjustment in your work hours. If you have, and I never remember, this is terrible, what it stands for. I always call it RRMS.
Relapsing remitting
Thank you.
multiple sclerosis.
Oh, I always call it RR for short because I could never remember. If you have that type of MS, you could work 3 days a week and be high functioning and very productive, and then day 4 you might collapse. If you have a flexible work arrangement with your employer, maybe that day you can work from home. Maybe that day, if you're working from home, instead of doing a traditional 9 to 5 hours, if you're really fatigued in the morning, maybe you can work from 10 till 6, or maybe even 11 till 8, or whatever, or something like that. So you could work that out with your employer if you have a computer set up at home, and then you could be working offsite all the time. Funding, there is funding available for resources and accommodations. One of the funding bodies, and I'm relating to Ontario right now. I did, just to digress a little bit, did do some research to see what facilities and what resources were available for all the other provinces in Canada. And the fastest way to find funding that I found is to Google, if you're living in Alberta, Google Alberta Community Services. If you're living in Quebec, Quebec Community Services, and you will get a list of different services that are out there for you that can provide you with some assistance. In Ontario, there is a funding body called the Assistive Devices Program, and there are certain places in Ontario where you can go and have an assessment. It's related to technology. If you're living with MS and you work on a computer all day in your job, for instance, and things start to change and you have lots of numbness in your digits and you can't operate a regular keyboard anymore, you might need some kind of an assistive device to help you use a computer. Then find a place where you can get an assessment completed with a full recommendation, and you will be funded by the Assistive Devices Program for, I think it's 75% of the funds, up to $5,000 every 5 years. And then the balance, you would be responsible for the 25%. If you're an ODSP income recipient, then ODSP will pick up the other 25% for you. Other sources of funding if needed. There are other sources of funding out there. Our organization has a fund, very small fund that we use to assist our clients if they needed to buy a new printer or whatever to use their computer. There's funding now. Employment Ontario has increased their funding now, and they're almost matching ODSP funding for employment supports program, whereas they will fund you. There's a fund called under ODSP, it's called EWORDS, EWRDS, which is Employment and Work-Related Disability Support. They have a fund and they will pay, I think it's approximately $300 a month. If there's something you need, you had mentioned, Rebecca had mentioned interpreters in the court system. If you need an interpreter, or if you need a note taker, or if you need to buy a recording machine so that you can attend meetings, team meetings, and record the contents of the meetings, you can use that fund for that as well. Employment Ontario also has that fund, a similar fund now. They've matched ODSP. So there are some other sources of funding out there that you can use. before you even go to the employer, although it is the employer's duty to accommodate, just to let everybody know that there are other sources of funding. And most important tip to continue working is having a work-life balance. In my previous employment, when I worked in real estate, I had a very highly stressful job as manager of the membership department for the Toronto Real Estate Board, and I was newly diagnosed with MS. So I went through a lot of transitions that year, including being laid off because they restructured the organization. So I was facing unemployment, living with this disability, and also a huge career change as well because I couldn't go back to what I was doing before. It was too stressful. And so I decided to change careers and receive the funding for it. But how I maintain my work-life balance at work is I never, ever, ever take work home with me, ever. As soon as I enter my car into the parking lot, I close the door of my car. That is it. I don't even give work a second thought, not for the whole weekend. If anybody has the nerve to call me when I'm not at work and ask me a work-related question, I can totally blank out work and I just don't, I say, I'm sorry, I can't even think about that right now. I don't even know where that file is right now. I can't answer your question. It'll have to wait until I go into work on Monday. And and it's worked. It's worked for me. It doesn't affect me as far as my performance reviews are concerned at work. And I absolutely don't think about work at all. I de-stress when I'm driving home, if there is any stress. And then when I go into work on a Monday, I start to open my mind up again and I get into the work mode. But I have this ability now to totally cut it off. Even my lunch hour, I take a lunch hour every day away from my workstation. And if I'm at lunch, they know I work with about 40 people at SCI Ontario, that there's one person that'll come up and ask me a work-related question while I'm reading the newspaper and eating my lunch. Because I just put my hand up and it's like, don't bother me. I'm untouchable right now for an hour. So I think you have to, if you're working and living with a disability, you really have to take control of that because that's what can take its toll on you while you're working and living with a disability, is taking work home with you. A lot of the staff I work with relish the days, the snow days where they can have a day and they can work from home. I hate it. I have no interest in it at all. Not at all. Episodic disabilities, I really don't need to speak about this now because I think Tammy's covered it, but some of the points I have here, and I could be wrong, you can correct me, accommodations for sure, flexible work hours, I talked about that before, be aware of triggers, know your own body. If you are feeling a trigger and something's happening, then of course you can go into this self-coping mechanism, and whatever you do to de-stress yourself, it could be deep breathing, it could be listening to music. I go outside and I just breathe a couple of breaths of fresh air and I come in, and that's enough for me. Work from home days, we talked about that before, although that would make me probably more stressed because I don't enjoy doing that. Plan financially and emotionally ahead. And we talked about journaling as well. I think journaling is really, really important. It's keeping track of your diet, of your activities, of any bad days. And like I said, like think back, reflect what happened on the weekend. What did I do on the weekend that was different from the previous weekend that affected me and my ability to do the job? Income replacement options. I think most of them, you did a great job. You did better than I think I could do covering them, and Tammy. I was going to talk a little bit about Ontario Disability Support Program, about income supports. I won't go into all the details because I don't work for income support, so I don't want to give you any misleading information. You can work while you're receiving ODSP income supports. You're allowed to earn a certain amount of money. I think they've recently changed it to $200 a month income. And anything over and above that, they will allow you to keep 50%, and then they will pay you 50%. I won't go into the dollar details right now, but you are able to work while you're receiving ODSP. You're also able to work while you're receiving CPP disability. I think the maximum is now $5,000. And so you are able, and of course, there's not a lot of jobs that you're going to do that are going to pay you $5,000, you know.
I'm sorry, can you, that was a question that was going to be coming out. Is that $5,000 for the year?
Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah, for the year. Employment insurance, sick benefits, if they're needed, they're there. If you're EI eligible. And just to backtrack, for the second career, strategy program that funds you to go back to school if you're changing careers. You do need to be EI eligible, I believe. Short and long-term disability insurance, and then of course personal rainy day funds. If any of us have any of those, they're called savings. Something new. And I learned something from you as well. Some of the other programs that are available. Thank you. And I'm pretty much finished. I just wanted to end with one quote that we should all remember as individuals that are living with disabilities, that is that you are a good person who deserves to feel good about yourself, always. And that's it, and I'm done. And my contact information is there.
Jenny, thank you so
No
very
problem.
much. I have a question.
Did I speak really quickly?
You did very well.
I'm from Britain and I tend to speak very, very quickly.
Well, we all appreciate that. So here's the comment or question for you, and
Okay.
then we're going to take a very quick break as we set up our panel, and then we have some questions for the three of you. So you did answer one person's question, which was how much can you earn on top of CPP? So we appreciate that. The other question, though, is you had mentioned about the second career program.
Mm-hmm.
And so the question was, I was informed that the second career program is available if you are newly laid off. Where can I find out about this program for future training so I can keep employed? I'm currently working part-time, but due to physical demands of work, which in her past has been nursing, there's no option of accommodation. I am stuck as to what to do. So talk more a little bit about this second career program and how can we get information on it.
The second career strategy program initially was started to support individuals who were laid off. And a prime example is the GM, General Motors worker, guy that works on the production line. He's called the widget guy. Some of us are a little young and may not know who a widget guy is, but a widget guy is a guy who puts the widget in the hole all day. That's all he does is this. That's all he knows how to do. He's worked on the production line at GM for 40 years and he gets laid off. He has zero transferable skills. Nobody's looking for a widget guy anymore. They use a machine now that does this. So he's unemployed. He's a prime candidate for second career, which is how when they initially started the program. They soon realized, in their great wisdom, that a lot of the money for second career wasn't being used. And they opened up the gates a little bit, the floodgates, and allowed people with disabilities to also access the second career program. So if a person has been, like the widget guy, has been working for 40 years and can no longer do his job because of a disability, then he is looking at changing his career and he would also be eligible for this program. And how to access the program, you would need to find an Employment Ontario resource center such as ours, where I work, and you can come to me, and we're also an assessment center for second career strategy, and I can help you. I can complete an assessment and tell you if you're eligible for the program. It is a little bit of work involved on the part of the participant or the applicant. You will be required to research college programs, obtain information on the programs, complete a financial statement, just like when you're applying for ODSP income support. At my program, when I initially started, it took me 9 months from when I first thought about changing careers to my first day of school. So it took me approximately 9 months. So you need to find a location that is an assessment center. You can find a list of assessment centers on the Second Career Strategy website, which is a Government of Ontario website.
Now,
MTCU.
is there anything that people can search for across the provinces? So is there a federal program, or is anybody aware of provincial programs outside of Ontario?
I would do the same thing. I would go into the government I would access the Ontario government website, go into the Alberta government website and look for training programs or funding for training, and you'll find the same information. That's how I would locate it. I don't have a list of all the provinces, but that's the first place I would look.
Thank you, Jenny. I do have another comment that's come up. So in the case of this questioner, this individual owns a virtual background screening company.
Okay.
Okay. She herself has MS and uses a wheelchair. Our consultants all work part-time from their home, and we are currently recruiting. How do you recruit people with MS as a target group across Canada? And then she's given a website, which I think I won't put out right now online, but I will refer this website to you, Jenny.
Okay.
So someone looking to recruit people across Canada, and it looks like specifically people with disabilities, that
Can
they
come
can work
to
from
me.
home. Come to you.
Come to me.
So come to you, and as you said earlier, similar kind of search can take place across for such organizations like your services.
I don't need to know right now, but if her primary location is in Ontario or in Toronto area or whatever, then we could certainly work with her directly. If we can't work with her directly, then we could certainly refer her to sister agencies. I think that's the right term now. Sister agencies in Canada.
Okay. Another question for you, Jenny, before we go to our panel. How do you feel employers would react to someone just entering the workplace, no job experience, who asked to work from home most of the time from the beginning? My major disability is fatigue. Is it unrealistic to hope that those types of accommodations could be made?
No, it's not unrealistic. If regardless of, well, you said no work experience in a certain field, and then they're asking if they can work from home.
I get the impression it's someone possibly younger or someone who's never worked outside of the home before, so just entering the workforce, so they don't have any job experience.
They would be no different to somebody who doesn't have a disability or has no job experience. The best way to gain work experience is to volunteer, definitely. If you've just left school or whatever, graduated from high school, and you don't have a job to go to, then volunteer. Volunteering is worth its weight in gold as far as your resume is concerned. You could get a letter of recommendation from your volunteer experience. You can you can show your volunteer experience. When I prepare a resume, I'm not picky about whether the work experience is paid or unpaid. As far as I'm concerned, volunteers work just as hard as paid employees. So if somebody has work experience as a volunteer, I just group it under work experience. I don't differentiate between volunteering because there's still a little bit of a stigma around maybe volunteering. Like if you're volunteering, you're not making any money, so your skills can't be that great, you know. So I definitely I don't see that that's a deterrent at all to hire somebody, the fact that they have lack of work experience or if they want to work from home. If they can do the job from home as well as they can do it from on site in the workplace, then they would be a stronger consideration as the next person. But then I'm not all employers, and unfortunately, not all employers are fair.
Okay, so thank you, Jenny,
No
so
problem.
much for
Thank you.
presenting. We're now going to get set up for the last part, which
I'm
is
just
the
going to